we're racing today. We have a lot of fun. Come along, it's gonna be great. Our race we recently went to in Montana, the Big Sky Nationals with NHRDA.
Big Sky Truck Fest.
Big Sky Truck Fest.
Doesn't matter. Cut. So if you want to learn how to build a fast truck, a medium fast truck, or
a slow
common rail,
yep,
you've come to the right channel.
So I've got a 1996 Dodge Ram, regular cab, long bed. It's the white race truck, white, not just another white common rail swap, second gen. So it's got a motor out of it's a 2006. We swapped a 6.7 block in there. It's a factory crank, factory block, factory pistons. It's got Wagler billet rods. It's got 14 millimeter OptiTorque main studs and 14 millimeter OptiTorque head studs. It's got a Steed Speed 3000 on there with a Aggressor 480 and Aggressor GT 106 GT55. It's got just the basic DDP fueling, DDP injectors, CP3, dual CP3s. It's got one of our, call it a 2000-ish horsepower trans. It's really just a kind of a test unit that I'm always playing with new stuff on. What I changed for this event is I went and put in a dump valve. It's not commonly used in the diesel industry, but we're playing with it to help in spool up as well as keep the converter alive. That's the main thing. I also have some of the new valve springs, like a prototypes type set. We're making sure they're working, and if they work, which they've been really awesome so far, they're going to be seeing that in the public here pretty shortly.
And you ended up taking the junker, but you wanted to take Uncle Rico. What happened to Uncle Rico?
So I built a truck called Uncle Rico, and it's a 95 Dodge four-wheel drive, second gen, and it's been eating blocks. And I had gotten a new engine together with block filler before this event, and it broke.
1424 though.
And so I decided to take good old backup, the working man's truck, the junker drag truck. Now the junker drag truck recently been put together with a slew of power-driven parts that we've been wanting to test. It has a Stage 2 street head, a hot street head on there. It has 14 millimeter socket cap head bolts that we're about to release, potentially to see what they will hold. It has a prototype towing camshaft they're working on releasing. It has a Stage 4 power-driven injection pump, and that's been very solid. It has some prototype power jet injectors bigger than we sell. A 650 horse towing transmission, dare I say that?
What do you got for turbos?
Turbos. That's the best part. It has
turbos.
an Aggressor 6260. You do like turbos, don't you?
I like turbos.
Has an Aggressor 6267, which is like an HE351 style turbo that fit on let's say an 03 to 07 Dodge 5.9. Very good turbo. And then the big one is our new Aggressor 480. And a lot of the 480 Aggressor testing was done on this truck. Has several hundred dyno passes on it. It's just been rock solid. So I expected it to perform flawlessly at this event because it's so well sorted out from dyno testing.
And I took the Cummins Cart. This has been a kind of a wreck for the past year or so. I've broken 2 engines in it. We kind of figured out the real problem with it, and we got it fixed this time. And so I had to build a new engine. In the past, I was a single turbocharger. I had everybody in the class is a single turbo and spray. And John Sherrado, a friend of ours, is single turbo and spray, and said that's the way to go. So I tried it, and pretty much it sucks. Single turbos
Compounds
always
are the
suck.
best, all right? Everybody knows this now.
So I'm like, screw this. I'm going back to compounds. So now I'm running, just like Meyer, the Aggressor 480 as my small turbo. And then I am running a Garrett G57 102 millimeter as the atmosphere charger. Very, very simple setup I built. This is the first one I've actually built out of stainless steel, which is pretty fun to build that. And it turned out really pretty as far as my opinion.
It's right there in the background.
There it is, yes. Still very pretty. It's a fairly straightforward build. We got a 6.7 block that we bored out and sleeved down with power bore sleeves with a 6.4 liter. Some diamond pistons. I got a power-driven Stage 2 head on there. I got the same valve springs Meyer has in Scrat. The last ones I ran kind of floated valves and had some problems. These ones have been great so far. Got a kind of experimental transmission in this one with the SFI case and SFI bell housing, kind of fun stuff there.
But you guys are running big input shafts in your transmission?
Yep, fat inputs.
I'm running a standard towing shaft in my transmission, but somehow it's able to pull the front tire off the ground.
Pretty cool. That's really cool. I mean, that's basically the thrust of the build. I mean, it's got Wagler rods, lining up at DDP, maybe some pretty sweet 24 valve, dual feed big injectors. That's technology we don't have that he does, so I really appreciate that.
Your 13 mil pump, we built that in-house.
Yep.
That's some prototype stuff we're testing that we're trying to bring to public for staging and injection pump control.
Yeah.
Kind of making it digital. Dare I say we're adding electronics to P-Pump?
So, yes, I got some experimental stuff there, which is freaking amazing. Meyer's the man for figuring that one out, obviously. And yeah, that's the build. And did a couple dyno runs. Time to go to Montana. So in Montana, this was kind of a cool event. We kind of had a special treat for us this time. We had 2 days.
So for the first time in the history of power-driven diesel, we showed up at an event before it started, actually early, ready to go.
Yeah.
And it was a test day, so we could test with no stress of racing, and you could take all the time you wanted to fix a leak or sort out a problem before you went and sent it down the track. There was lots of people to help. I could get out of my truck and help. It was very
awesome.
good. If you ever race, we recommend you go there a day early. It's awesome.
It was very fun. So we got unloaded, and I started warming my truck up. Was I the first one down the track? I think I was the first one down the track.
Yep.
And so I mean, this is a new build. Turbos are new. Everything's new. I'm kind of going fuel only. I am using nitrous to spool up, and I'm using nitrous off the line to be a quick 60 foot. So I just threw a random tune-up at it as a pretty good fuel only tune for the power. And I ended up running my best ever pass right off the trailer, and I didn't even know it. Meyer was laughing at me, but I ended up running a 552 first pass off the trailer. I've never been in the fives. I've been 6.0 something. I've been bugged. I hope to get into the fives this weekend. And I thought at first.
Now, what is that in quarter mile terms? Because not everybody knows what eighth mile is if they're not into racing. Let's say 880 or something. Somewhere in the 8-second quarter mile pass is what that would have been.
And it was amazing. And I looked at the time slip and I misread it. So I was like, kind of bugged.
I got to the pits and like he had just pulled in. I got to the pits and I'm like, dude, heck yeah, you did it. Like, that's awesome. Like, straight off the trailer. And he's just like, man, dude. Dang. I'm like, what is your problem? Like, you just ran a 550.
I was like, what?
You're like 551. I was like, what?
Did not look nearly as excited enough.
No, because I thought this thing was like that. Like, that felt so fast.
I'm like, yeah. And he like looks at the time slip and he's like, oh my gosh, I was looking at the reaction time, 6:12. Like, like
Really
the time
working that
itself, 5:50. And he's like, oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I had the number 6 in my mind, and that felt way faster than a 6. I'm like, light years faster. When I saw that 6 number, I'm like, oh my gosh, how fast do I have to go? There's no way I could ever be competitive in this class, because that was the fastest thing I've ever done, and it's still slow. But it wasn't slow.
Yeah.
It was not slow. It was a 552 right off the trailer. I had 5 or 6 passes trying different shifting strategies, different tire pressures, and I was pretty much just printing 5.5 something times 552, 556, low 130, 132, 131, 60-foot times. Every pass that I did that day, every single one, was better than any pass I'd ever done before that day. Every time I do a pass in one of my trucks, something breaks, and I'm just coming back, and there's no leaks. It's not hot. It just worked time and time again, and my biggest task in the pits was getting the fans on the engine to cool it down between rounds. That's pretty much what I was doing all days. It's like, okay, it's cold enough, I'm going back. And I did that all day long.
So the Junker, I haven't raced it for years, it seems like. I mean, I've done some dirt drags, but on an actual drag strip.
You haven't been on a drag strip since I've been here. That's over
5
6 years.
6 years.
So it's been a long while. The first thing I noticed is how comfortable I was in this vehicle. Say I got in there, first run off the trailer, take off, runs a 680. And I'm trying to run 670 index class. I'm like, this is pretty good. I'm only a 10th off.
Meyer and I are in the pits like, dang.
Like, Todd, 550. Will, 680. I'm
Like,
dude,
we're
nice.
killing it. Yeah,
And
well
so
done.
I go back to the pits and nothing's broke, nothing's wrong. So I ended up doing 3 or 4 more passes. I never did get down to 670. I tried some things. I took the passenger seat out, tried launching harder, and as the day warmed up, the track wasn't as sticky. I think the worst I ran was a 688. And so I was like, this thing's dialed in. There's no reason to beat on it anymore. I was like, hey, Meyer, when's the last time we serviced this tram? He's like, oh, it's still on the break-in. I'm like, so this has 20 eighth mile passes on it, 200 dyno poles on it. And I decided to drop the fluid, and it was ready. The filter had some debris. So that was basically the end of my test and tune day. But I was excited to go to race day.
I had a fairly sorted setup, except I had that new dump valve in there. So I did a couple partial pulls and trying to like figure out what was going on, and ultimately decided to get rid of the dump valve. Did a fluid change. The converter was definitely fairly hurt, but I was like, you know what? Hey, like, I'll just crank the pressure up on this thing to see if it'll hold together through race day tomorrow. So
what was your best pass during test day?
I don't know. My slowest was a 7.4, and I think I got into the 6s, but not super deep.
And you had the most horsepower of all the trucks, right?
Yes.
And you had the heaviest truck of all the trucks.
Yes.
I want to say sometimes a lighter truck with less power is more reliable than a heavy truck with a lot of power. I don't know what your problem is, bro.
Shocker. Anyway, the new stuff didn't work that great. It held good on the dyno. It held good on the street, but you have to be like, in order to find that out, you have to like do a legitimate launch and then try to grab second and try to grab lockup. And like, that's way too sketchy to do on the street.
And the pits, like, you service the trans, you figure stuff out. I was cooling off my engine.
All at a full day.
I'll call it a full day.
Another thing that was pretty cool for us was like after the test and tune on Friday, a lot of transmissions hit the floor. What was really cool was, I mean, you serviced yours because it was well overdue. I serviced mine because I had a dump valve issue.
And I put a fan near mine.
Yeah, he had to cool his off with a fan. But that was it. No transmissions got pulled.
I mean, mine should have been pulled because it's a towing transmission and you shouldn't do that with it. But you know what? It did it.
It did it.
So Saturday morning, race day, most people are unloading their stuff, scrambling. We're already unloaded. We're already set up. We're already teched in even. They teched us the night before.
Yeah, shout out to the tech guy. He went through the pits the night prior and
so
just went
nice.
through and teched everyone.
But anyway, so it was very easy, and so we're ready to race. There's like almost no stress. The vehicles are all
Yeah, they're ready to
working.
go for the most part.
So first round,
Qualifying. Pro Street. We don't have very many competitors in Pro Street. It's one of the higher classes, so I think there's only 2 other competitors, John Sherrado and Skyler from DDP. And so we just went one at a time. We didn't race each other for qualifying, but one at a time. The first pass off the trailer yesterday was with 552, and on Saturday it was with 553. So I'm just, again, right back to level 5.5, just
so you're number one qualifier after
number
the
one
first round.
qualifier. Yep, first round. Second round, same thing happened, but then John Sherrado's got a really fast truck. He pulled out a 545. So I am now the number 2 of 3. Sherrado is the number 1 qualifier.
So my first round, the air was cooler in the morning, and the truck hooked really hard. It ran a 666 at 105.7 or something. I mean, it picked up 2 mile an hour at 60 footed better, and so I ran too quick. It was supposed to run 670. So my first run made me like the worst qualifier. When you run lower than the index, you might as well have ran a 30-second pass.
Yeah.
So my first round was kind of trash.
Yeah.
And then I only ran one qualifying pass. This was like right after I changed the fluid, so I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And I think I qualified with a 6.4 or something. And so ultimately it put me kind of mid-pack with everyone qualifying.
Your first elimination round was the best race of the whole event.
So I raced the daily driven truck, which he's like super awesome. He's got a fairly, pretty sorted setup. He had been running a 6.4. I seen him go down the track a couple times, and I knew I had run a 6.4, and I was like, okay, well, I have more power to go. So I'm like, turn it up, and so I'm like, well, I don't know what he's going to run, but I should be able to run faster than he is. So I was fairly confident going into it. I told him, like, hey, I'm not hard to beat. Just leave me at the tree. Lights turned yellow. He left, and I, of course, waited for green again. And so I was a little bit behind him, so I was like watching him drive, but I had added more power to the truck. I had bumped the leave RPM up about 100 RPM. Something wasn't happy, and it just absolutely annihilated the tires, and it got going pretty sideways, but I saw him in my windshield, and I was like, I am not letting out. So we ended up just driving through it, shifting mid-drift. It was pretty...
So you basically did a 4-wheel drift over to the wall and stayed in it and grabbed a gear and then pulled it back.
Yeah, I looked at the logs. I was mid-drift going out of my lane when I grabbed second, and then on the side of the skirt when I grabbed third, and that's when it kicked the tires again. I like drifted back into the lane. That was pretty entertaining and fun to drive, but he was definitely way ahead of me, and then like right before the finish line, he ended up blowing up his turbo. I just nosed ahead of him by like 0.075 seconds. If he hadn't blown up, he would have had me 100%. And then I got back to the pits. The wife's like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. John Schrado's wife was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And then Will's over here like, my man.
I got a video of Todd and Lenny Reed from DDP. Todd, you watch Myers run?
Yeah, that's amazing. He did a quarter-mile pass, 8th mile.
What do you think, Lenny?
That boy's a driver.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you got the win.
Yep, got the win, barely.
Round 2. Of you, of course.
So my first round, I went up and I was racing this big lifted truck on like 35s. I left him at the starting line. He never, I don't even know if he got his truck spooled up before the tree
his
dropped.
staging limiter got stuck on.
Easy win, round 1 there, and moving on to the next round. How about you?
My round was easy for me and unfortunate for Skyler. Skyler hurt his transmission in qualifying. Since I was number 2 qualifier, he's number 3, him and I had to race. He couldn't show up to the starting line, so I had a mechanical bite of the finals. So I just kind of went up, tripped the beams. At this
Now,
point, I had
why do you
issues
break
spooling.
the beams?
I guess it proves you were able to race. I would have liked to have done a pass, but I was having spool-up issues all of a sudden. I ended up figuring it out, and by the time the finals came around, I was ready to go.
So then round 2.
I was up against Poor Boys Diesel 3rd Gen. It's a well-sorted truck. I left with the same power that I did the previous run, but I toned down the power about 20 feet out. Definitely was a good change. I ended up running a 6:15, which was my fastest pass of the day. He was definitely on a good pass. He had a better reaction time than me. He ran faster than me. Like, I lost in basically every single way.
So my round 2, I ended up racing, I think it was a Nova that had a Duramax swap in it. Pretty sorted out car. So I was like, I need to beat him at the starting line. So I got pretty aggressive at the tree, and I think I cut like an 0 something light. I was out quite a ways in front of him, and I ended up hitting the brakes again to make sure I didn't break out. And I think I rolled to maybe a 690. Decent run, beat him. And I'm on to the next round.
I just got so used to like hear it just like zoom down the track, and it's like Will Terry for the dub.
So I pulled back around expecting to have another race, and they're like, no, you are in the finals now. And they're like, well, you're here, and this is who you're racing. And it happened to be a power-driven customer with a P-Pump 24 valve. And he was the winner from the Arizona race. So he's pretty confident in his 670, and he's a great dude. You know, I mean, I'm like a racer at heart, so I'm like, man, congrats, hope you win. And behind it, I'm like, dude, I'm going to cut the tree and cut your head off. You know, we're very first in the finals, and there's rain threatening, so they're like trying to hurry us up. We line up, and I, once again, O-light the crap out of him and pulled ahead. And his truck was so fast, he pulled ahead of me around the 60-foot mark. And he said that was the best 60-foot he'd ever cut. I think he cut a 149 60-foot. But I had him by almost 2/10 at the starting line. And then I came back around him at about 300 feet. And at the finish line, he ended up running 668, so he broke out. But I did beat him to the finish line.
From Cedar City, Utah, hello, Terry.
So anyways, I got the win. And then as soon as we're coming back on the return road, raindrops start hitting my windshield. And I'm like, oh, great, the event's going to be canceled.
I'm sitting in the staging lanes getting rained on. It just rained a little bit, but it dried out pretty quick. So like I said before, I had some issues spooling up. It was working good now. But in my attempts to fix this, I upsized my spool jet. And I didn't really have time to test that because I had to go up to the staging lanes. And I'm next to my friend John Sherrado, and he's kind of like building boost, working towards the first beam. And so I get to the first beam, and I hit my trans brake. And when I let off the brakes, my trans brake rolled a little bit. And that put me into the double bulb. So I'm double bulbed. I'm like, oh no. He was in the single bulb, and so now we're on a timer. If there's 3 bulbs lit, that thing's gonna go green within 7 seconds, whether or not John goes to the next bulb. I hit the nitrous button, and it stalled the truck. So I'm sitting there, both lights lit. John's pulling up, and I'm like, oh, this is over. Lights go green, he takes off. I'm like, have fun, John. We're hoping for a good side-by-side pass, fun down the track. Like, I was really excited for this race. It's gonna be a lot of fun. We have 2 trucks, very similar in speed. It's gonna be fun, but it wasn't meant to be. The one thing I have yet to perfect on the Cummins Cart is the staging process. Like, it goes fast, works good, but if you can't have a good system of the tree, it's not that great of a race truck.
You were still staged there with
I
the
was.
truck off.
Yep, so I started to back up, and good old Will Terry walks over to me and says,
Hit it anyway. Do a run.
okay, and I pulled my fastest pass of the whole entire event. I ran a 5.40.
So you totally would have won the final had you not snuffed the truck.
Yes.
And the reason it went a little faster is you said you had a little nitrous problem.
Remember earlier I said I was running nitrous to get me off the line and spool the turbos quicker? Turns out that wasn't actually hooked up.
It looked fast.
It felt fast. So now going forward, I got to figure out, like I say, staging and launching.
I gotta figure out dump valve, and I gotta figure out my launching mechanism. Leave faster than 1 business day.
I am going to build a new engine. Version 5.0 is coming out, 53 block.
And anyway, that was Montana. It was a very fun event. I had a lot of fun.
Yep, lots of fun. Always cool to see all like our West Coast brothers.
So anyway,
Thanks, guys.
So Todd drove his truck in the trailer. Will drove his truck in the trailer.